Right, well, wonderful to see everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Those of you who've been coming here for decades will know that this was once known as the Poetry Next to the Sea Festival, which then became Sea Fever. Vicky and Charles have taken it on for 2 years and slightly shifted the tone and the focus, and it's called a festival of landscape and literature, and it means that it's about the ways, if those of you were there earlier for Julia's talk, about the ways in which words actually bring remedies, the ways in which words translate into action. And that seems to me centrally important in a time of crisis. Charles Clover embodies this ideal. He is an award-winning environmental writer and activist, and this seems to me very important, and that's why we're so lucky to have him here today. For 22 years he was the environmental editor at the Daily Telegraph, 7 years at the Sunday Times. He's a multi-award winning author of the book The End of the Line, which was a kind of lifted the lid, if you can, on this unseen world of what we were doing under the water. And this is very, in many ways, a talk about what happens in unseen places. But they are absolutely crucial because we are devastating our fisheries. Charles's film and book, both award-winning, have changed the landscape on understanding this. At least we can't say we didn't know. And here he's talking about a book which is not just about the problems, highlighting them through powerful and evocative words, but the kinds of things that we can do, because without this dynamic switchover into action, we'll never make things better. So we're really fortunate to have Charles here, but we are going to take you on an emotional journey, because we have to show you how shit our seas are before you can begin to feel hope. So that's the emotional arc of the talk. Charles, really, some of your book, especially in the last chapters, deals with the size of the EU's fishery, which you say is the biggest world market for deep fish. These have international fish fleets pillaging the sort of African fish off African coasts. You then talk about the Chinese fishery, 3,432 ships, but suggest there might be 17,000 vessels which could go into open waters to take the world's fish, to take these, what we call fish stocks. Just run us through the kind of devastating effects of the size of this take, but also the methods, because in Julia's talk she mentioned the fact that they were dredging up mammoth bones and fossil tools, but just take us through the deeply destructive side of the way in which the mechanisms by which we take our fish catch.
Thank you. Good prompt. The most devastating, which is the distant water fleets, the Chinese being the largest in the world, mostly focused on trawling, so that's all scraping the seabed, with probably an enormous bycatch. Certainly off the west coast of Africa, the main target is prawns, and the bycatch is sort of 80% of other fish, which get lowered down off the decks and sold in local markets. But very little is wasted, but it is caught in a wasteful way, and without probably much policing of the numbers caught. So these distant water fleets fish for the tastes of different nations. For us it's tuna, and for the Europeans, the unsustainable distant water fleet that the EU has catches yellowfin and big eye and skipjack in the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific, all with drifting fish aggregation devices, which fish don't like featureless sea. They come and congregate around features, and the features are lethal because they put a purse seine net around them and scoop the lot up, and we're taking too much of that. It's quite a depressive thought, but we've just won a very important battle in the EU, bizarrely, though we continue as Blue Marine Foundation, charity has started to take actions in the EU with other NGOs who are based there. So luckily we managed to keep the whole thing together. And you know, in the world's oceans, I mean, things aren't really too cool in terms of the tragedy. The commons still happening. This is a picture of an award-winning picture by an Indian photographer called Just One Day's Catch. And it's about the Bay of Bengal. These are marlin and sailfish, and they probably all take between 3 and 15 years to mature. So if you catch that many in one day, there aren't going to be very many at some point in the future. It's an unregulated fishery. So that's the tragedy of the commons in its purest form. But you can also have a commons that the management of which is collapsing. And I'm afraid we live in one here. You will have read this week the headlines about the mackerel, where the scientists are recommending we take 77% less mackerel from the sea next year because we've been catching 40% too much for the last 40 years. So some of the most sophisticated countries in the world are meant to be able to organise their own commons management committee, and they are failing. So that's another commons that is failing, as well as the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic. Some of these introduced measures over these regional fisheries organisations we set up in the last 50, 60 years actually started out well and managed it. But the more the commercial pressure... Can you give us an example of those, Charles?
Well,
in the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, and in the case of the mackerel, it's based in Mayfair. It's called the North East Atlantic Fisheries Commission, and it's got all these terribly sophisticated civil servants on it, and it's got all these lovely people from, well, including Russia. It's got these lovely people from Iceland, from Norway, and from the European Union, but they achieve nothing, and this is the result. And we really have got to do something about it. And then we come back another level to our own waters, to British waters after Brexit. And you will have possibly noticed that that scientists advised a zero catch there too for the northern shelf cod, which is what we're now pleased to call the cod off the west of Scotland, the north of Scotland, and the North Sea, right out here. Zero catch, because we've been catching too much of that as well. And we've been catching too much of that for several years now, because our fisheries law since Brexit, written for Brexit, is not good enough. We have just proved that in the High Court. We lost because the ministers have power to make as many bad decisions as they like, and they are making them. 54% of the fishing opportunities allocated in Britain to the British fleet, 54% are above scientific advice. That's, if you take the milking stool definition of sustainable development, with the 3 pillars in society, industry, and the natural resource, you're basically sawing off one of the bottom of one of the legs of the stool every year. So you have to saw the other ones off too, and slowly the whole stool goes down because they've got the wrong definition of sustainability. But that's what we discovered through the process of disclosure that you get when you sue the government. We've found out what they're doing, and what they're doing is just saying, oh, we can't do that this year because it's too expensive for the industry. Not what is too expensive for the nation, what is too expensive for nature over 10 years, and how much you've crashed it since 20 years ago. Oh no, it's too difficult this year. That's all they look at, and it's wrong. So,
yeah. Before we let the audience rise again, elevated by good news stories, just take me, because one of the powerful things for me is seeing what a dredger does to the seabed. I mean, the seabed is a complex ecosystem full of bioplants, if you like, seaweeds, all bottom feeding fish, corals, etc., etc. What actually does a dredger do? Can you give us a sort of land equivalent of what a dredger does when it passes across the seabed areas?
Well, I think somebody read this. It probably might have been me in the end of the line. It's like bulldozing a rainforest to catch birds.
Mm. Yeah. So it leaves a trail of absolute devastation.
So scallop dredging, and to an extent most forms of trawling, are not only extremely unspecific, but they're also destructive to the seabed, which is the forests of the sea are actually largely animals. They're corals and hydroids and things like that. There are the vegetation tends to grow closer to the shore than seabeds. Seagrasses are the things that and kelp, but the further down you get, it's mainly animals, and it smashes them up, and fish come in and eat them. So you've got different fish and different animals there, but it does look like a ploughed field. And here's where we're going, is that actually if you stop doing that, within a remarkably short period of time, it comes back. And it comes back gangbusters, and we have shown this. So the paradox I'm currently struggling with is that there are two narratives going on at the sea at the moment. One I described in the end of the line, which is like that. And the other one I hope I've described in Rewilding the Sea, which is we can do this. But the paradox I'm currently not understanding, and is driving me mad, is that, even though Sir David Attenborough has finally got this message I've been putting out for 25 years, and made a film about it, which we call End of the Line 2.
Modestly.
Yeah, quite. But if you look at some of the messages, they are sort of word for word. Thank God he's taken the message. He's said it, and he's more famous than I am, and more people are listening to it. The thing that bothers me is we have raised all this consciousness. The people now know what trawling is doing to the seabed. This meme that I set up in the first page of the End of the Line, everybody's got it now. We've made little films about it. People know that trawling is bad and that you must limit it, and yet we're not doing it. And yet the civil servants are still writing laws that enable the minister to weasel out of ecologically necessary decisions. And I'm still wondering how the hell we are letting them get away with it.
One thing I wanted to do to clarify the connection between words and action is this word rewilding has a lot of attention as a terrestrial meme or as a terrestrial ethic about how we should tackle. Just take us through, as many people are confused about what it means, and there possibly is a distinction between what it means at sea and what it means on land, but just take us through this concept of rewilding. Where does it come from? Why is it so helpful to terrestrial environments, but especially why is it so helpful for marine environments?
Well, I think it's a very cynical thought, but it is quite possible that rewilding is only possible in the sea because we have mucked up so much of the land and we don't know what the land really ought to be like or how big an area you need. But the sea potentially, even though we have heavily damaged the waters around our islands, the sea has this immense dynamism, this immense power to restore itself, and that's why it's so annoying if people don't. I mean, let's think the difference between rewilding the sea and rewilding the land is marginal. It is because it is a commons. That's a distinction. Jake here is managing land that is owned by someone. We all own the sea. It's a common. It's up to us to manage it, to tell the managers of it, our politicians, what we want to do. And I hope you will go away from here and do that, because they're not doing it. But the wonderful thing about the sea is this dynamism, and the way you invest in the sea in that dynamism is by leaving it alone for more of the time. If you leave the cod alone, there will be more cod. If you leave the mackerel alone, there will be more mackerel. If you particularly leave some of these allegedly protected areas, actually paper parks, like the Dogger Bank, which we finally got protected, if you leave them alone, you will see wonderful things. You will see life come back that probably wasn't there since the Middle Ages. We're already seeing one or two of these. I was out on the Dogger Bank and we saw some, what's it called?
Sturgeon?
Optica Icelandica. It's an ocean quahog. It lives for 500 years.
What is it? What is it, Charles?
It's a clam.
A clam. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we could. I mean, as you rightly say, we could see common skate and sturgeon back there.
Yeah.
But it has been, it has been completely depleted. The people I knew who dived the Dogger Bank in the 70s for cod say there isn't any cod there anymore. It's all been caught.
Yeah.
So it will take a while.
Yeah.
And where are these fish going to come in from? It'll be random, and they will need to flow into these places that are suddenly growing things on the seabed. But I have every confidence that in 20 years that's what will happen. So we do need to meet more of it alone, more of the time. But astonishing things happen in that three-dimensional space in the water column, which is quite different and more magical even than what happens at NEP, which is pretty magical.
Four-dimensional, I suppose, in a way, because you talked about the fact
Time.
that, yes, we need time. I forgot to mention the most important thing about Charles' activism in my introduction, which is that he is the founder and was the executive chair of Blue Marine Foundation. So I'm going to lift your spirits a little bit now with questions about localised action, which have been absolutely transformative in those specific places. Just take us a little bit through these two initiatives that you had some role in Dorset in the Lyme Bay Marine Protected Area Working Group, and then also perhaps in the Sussex Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority. But particularly with reference to this coast, we have a group in the audience today who are working on reintroducing oysters to our sea area just off the coast here. So could you take us a little bit through those kinds of initiatives and how incredibly successful your relationship with your fisherman friend of his mid-70s, Eric Smith? Just tell us a little bit about those actions and what you've achieved in those areas.
Well, I think it wasn't me, it was Eric who said, Eric is 76, he's a free diver, and he's been free diving since the 50s in the offshore, which is a slightly unpromising place, in Sussex, looking at the life there. And he has observed that the kelp is 80-90% gone since his first days of diving without oxygen. It's very shallow. It was who persuaded the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority that really this eclipsing of the kelp wasn't good enough and we needed to do something about it, and managed to get a bylaw written that we helped him to get through. And we helped him to publicise, and David Attenborough made a film about it. It was very nice. And one of those things that, one of those conservation success stories, that suddenly everybody's in favour of it, and including the fishermen, as it happened. And it just went through. And it was quite marvellous and quite magical what has happened since. The things that have come back in very, very short time. That was only about 5 years ago. And the mussel beds that are growing in places off Brighton where you wouldn't see them. There are stingrays off Sussex coast which have not been seen for years. There was an angel shark. It just proves that if you protect the seabed, if you protect the habitat, the fish know all about that and they'll come to it. And there were also, bluefin tuna, which has been an enormous success story. again, something I had something to do with, it coming off in that same jump belt, off Brighton just the other day. Whenever I need a huge hit of enthusiasm and optimism, I go and look at something called Sussex Underwater on Facebook, and it's marvellous.
And that's, you're seeing the restoration of these environments once we take the boot off the throat. Just tell us a little bit. I mean, the extraordinary thing for me was we're very interested in rewilding or these ideas of trophic cascades and the way in which life unfolds very quickly when certain apex species are reintroduced. Those can be things like sea otters or wolves, and those have enormously beneficial effects. But in the case of the oyster, this is a very humble creature. This is humble, but also associated with Covent Garden and expensive champagne bars. But the oyster was just the common food of ordinary people, but has an amazing impact at an oceanic and maritime level. Just take us a little bit through that. What do? They sort of take the water and take the crap out, don't they?
Well, they filter an probably huge number of litres of water every day. So the reason the Solent, for example, is quite as cloudy as it is because it doesn't have the enormous oyster beds that it once had, as recently as the 70s. And I was asked, I mean, there's another story brought up, which you can come to later, but I mean, I happen to be doing a project in Lyme Bay, where the government banned trawling in 2008. Again, that Labour government banned trawling because it was damaging the corals. It's called England's Coral Garden, Lyme Bay, because there's so many corals, sea fans, unusual sunset corals, cup corals, and what were those things that look like brains? Anyway, corals. They were all being completely trashed by scallop dredging. And we worked with the fishermen. We didn't get it banned. The country got it banned. And in time, it all came back. But what was the missing link there, the missing feature, was the fishermen. Because the inshore fishermen were doing no harm whatsoever, but no one was prizing them for occupying the territory and preventing other things happening, being the eyes and ears, and just doing something sustainable. That was the least valued thing. So we thought we must give some value back to this. And the IFCA there said, well, you've done that one, it's taken you 10 years, why don't you do the oyster in the Solent? Because we are just banning the last oyster fishery there because they've fished it out. And so I looked at it, and this was another story of overfishing, only nobody had the nerve to say so. I mean, we had gone out, and it was another failure of regulation. It was another failure of the commons. There was a common that had gone to ruin because the regulators hadn't done their job. Not the fishermen's fault they go fishing. In the medieval era, you would call this stinting. No one was insisting or enforcing the stinting of oyster catching in the Solent. And everybody went on about bulimia, the disease, which had hit us in the 60s. Everybody went on about this and that and the other. But when you actually looked into it, it was another overfishing story. And so I thought, well, this is one of ours, isn't it? We better do this one. Better get this one sorted. So I remember I raised the first 20 grand from Gordon Roddick for this. Gordon Roddick, Body Shop, Anita's husband, who was an immensely wise donor to environmental causes. He said, it's not enough, but you raise the rest. And so far, I think we're on 8 million and rising. So we're putting back oysters, because oysters aren't just a species, they are an ecosystem. 466 species live with oysters, have some weird, mystical, or mysterious anyway, mysterious symbiosis with oyster beds. We put them in cages under the marinas because Bennett, he actually felt that that was a nice thing that he could do in his marinas. Everybody wanted to do a little bit of environmental good as part of their big projects, or did at the time. And so we put these oysters in what we call oyster hotels. And we're absolutely flabbergasted when what turned up in the hotels were seahorses, eels, blennies, everything that you could find, and all the rare ones were all hanging out with the oysters. Nobody's ever explained to me why that is. As Charles knows, I'm a salmon and sea trout fisherman, and I am convinced that there is a symbiosis between sea trout and possibly salmon, but mainly sea trout, which stay in the estuary and in the coastal waters, and oyster beds, but we still haven't found what that is. And when I joined that up, I'll have joined up 2 whole communities, but I will one day.
When you said that, I had a vision of hotels with seahorses and blennies all stood at the bar with champagne, drinking with the oysters.
It's like Star Wars.
But we really should focus, because I'm conscious that this should have been an hour and a half or 2 hours, Charles, because we've got so much to cover. But let's really let them soar, because your projects on the British Overseas Territories are truly world-changing and have been absolutely extraordinary. Just run us through the Chagos as the model, which is this massive sea area in the Indian Ocean, which you then transfer to Ascension. And we should perhaps show the slide at some point, but just take us through what Blue Foundation did. That you had a buddy, he gave you £1 million, you doubled the area of protected seas worldwide.
Actually, that buddy gave us it for the Solent design.
Oh, did he?
But we raised £1 million in Switzerland for the foundation of Blue Marine Foundation. That's probably the story you're thinking of.
Yeah.
It was roughly the same sum.
Right.
And here's £1 million. What is your little charity going to do? I will say that the reason our little charity came into being, almost against our will, was that when we made this film, The End of the Line, we took it to Sundance, we took it premiered in London. It was actually shown in cinemas, like David Attenborough's one, in about 2009. And we did all these question and answer sessions in the cinema. And in every question and answer session, whoever was taking it, whether it was me, whether it was the other producers, or the director, all the audiences said the same thing. What are you going to do about this? And we thought, well, we're filmmakers and, write stuff, and we'll go and make a bit more films and writing stuff, and that's what we do, isn't it? And they go, no, you need to solve this overfishing problem, because nobody's told us about it before, and clearly nobody's doing anything about it, so you need to do something about it. And we'd never thought of that. Between ourselves, we came to this idea that we ought to have another charity. We didn't really want to set up another charity, but clearly, when you looked at it, the one we did have, called the Marine Conservation Society, didn't do overseas territories. It didn't even do the British overseas territories. So that's where we started. What was our big idea? Well, I had to think this up, because they didn't have any ideas. I thought, well, we are going to do the British overseas territories, and we're going to do it now, and we're going to make this dying Labour government's idea that it will create a marine protected area. It wasn't our idea. Around the Chagos archipelago, we were going to make it real. Because the one thing we do know how to do, because we're film producers, is raise money very quickly and for good ideas. And we came up with a line that says, my colleague George Duffer disputes this line as true, but he has another one. But we said, would you like to create conservation you can see from space? And
it's a good idea.
For very little money, for the price of a townhouse in one of the better parts of London. And if you're selling that in Gestalt or Davos, that sounds like pocket money. And I said to these 2 guys who founded the charity with me. Who do you know? You've got 6 weeks. How many people do you know would actually have that kind of pocket money who would deploy it in 6 weeks? Don't bother asking anybody else. And George Duffield, who is a Claw family, Claw, I think, sponsored this building. George Duffield climbed a wall, famously with a ladder, between his mother's garden and somebody else in Gestalt, and said hello to the neighbours who were very shy and retiring, and got $5 million off them. And we saved the Chagos until Keir Starmer came along. That's another thing.
Where are the Chagos? Just draw for us a sort of. Is it south of the?
It's, if you've got a donkey and a tail, and if you stick the tail on the donkey, you stick it in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Middle of the Indian.
And that's where the Chagos archipelago is. It's 1,000 miles south of the Maldives.
And the no-take area was how big? It was bigger than Britain, wasn't it?
660,000 square kilometres. It was the biggest in the world at the time.
So almost 3 times the size of the entire UK in size. For £1 million quid. For £5 million quid.
$5 million.
$5 million. Yeah.
Well, that was just because it's always incremental. What is the money that the government doesn't have that's stopping it doing this? Because the government, if you remember, we just had the banking crisis, and that fella, the drawer in the Treasury, which said, we've spent all the money. It was precisely that moment when they were being asked to create the largest marine reserve in the world. And we told them on the Friday that we had the money, securely had the money, told the Foreign Office, told David Miliband, through a friend of mine who's SPAN, and his special advisor. And Miliband announced it on the Tuesday, and Gordon Brown called the election on the Wednesday. It was that tight. But we got it done. And we then rolled over, spent the next 5 years thinking, what are we going to do next? And then we persuaded the Cameron government to, it was probably the time for it.
Yes, yeah.
It's time for it, isn't it?
They've seen enough of these.
That to do the other overseas territories, which are now the British Blue Belt, which is the largest, or was until French Polynesia was announced this June. It was the largest network of marine protected areas on Earth, and it's still pretty close. So that is Ascension Island, from sort of partly under the water, partly on top, and that is Ascension Island. The circle with nothing in it except one small dot.
Right between Africa and South America.
That
there.
one. That is Ascension Island. It is a speck, a volcanic speck, with an area of sea about the size of France around it.
But rich in marine life, incredibly rich, full of sharks and whales. And
It has the largest marine animals I've ever seen. Fish, anyway. It does have whales, but it has, nearly 20 feet long marlin. It has huge.
Could you do the video? Because what you'll see is boats. Look at those two.
Hang on, I've gone the wrong way. Whoops, here we go.
Those two protected areas on the left. Look at how they fill with those.
No, sorry, I'm getting that. If I go into it,
Mike,
that way. That's it.
There we go.
This is fishing activity. The clouds are fishing activity monitored by satellites from space.
Yeah.
And that is conservation you can see from space.
Yeah. So that's stopping any fishing in those areas. Those are basically rewilded seascapes, aren't they?
Well, there is a recreational fishery for the but not a commercial one, crucially, for the residents of Ascension, and a site subsistence one. But there's under 1,000 people, maybe 800 people live there, and if they go out and catch the odd grouper or tuna, it's no skin off anybody's nose, because they've got that huge area to produce more grouper and tuna from. And the tuna are absolutely world-class size, huge thing.
This sort of links our earlier discussion of what you were doing locally with these huge meta schemes, these huge international, globally significant projects which have been implemented, saving billions of organisms. But in Tristan da Cunha, what was so moving for me in the book is that the local people, a tiny community living on the island, I think it was Tristan da Cunha, they earned about $5,000 a year, and all of them subscribe to a massive equal no-take area in those areas. And it's the relationship between local people and small-scale fishing, if you like, which seems to me the solution, Charles, that fishing needs to think small. Small is beautiful. The figure that you give, that there are 12,000 fishermen in Britain, and they make up 75% of the fishing vessels, and they get 4% of the quota. 75% of all the fishing vessels. So these local inshore fishermen are basically doing fishing that is sustainable, and I know Katrina Portis is in the audience and will share this sense of the way in which local fishermen are really the future. Do you want to just say a little bit about something that connects the local stuff you've done in the UK with those extraordinary projects elsewhere? Because they are still fished, aren't they, some of these? Or are they?
Yes, I mean, it is true that you can have marine protected areas with fishing, as long as the fishing is sustainable. The population of Tristan da Cunha, which is 250, I think every man, woman and child deserves some kind of Goldman Prize for taking the bravest and most important decision that their islands could possibly do, because they are more in tune with the sea and yet more dependent upon the sea than almost any other population on Earth, because they are completely dependent on the spiny lobster that they export via South Africa. It's very valuable. It's their only industry, and if they screw it up, they're finished. But they decided that they were going to make. The Foreign Office said, "Well, what would you like to do? We've got Clover and Co. pushed us into having this, blue belt, and we bring it to you. It's really up to you. What do you want to do? Do you want sort of 25%? Maybe sort of 30? You've got a lot of waters. Probably that's about right." And they said, "No, we'd like 75%, please, full no take, because we think our environment is second to none and is quite amazing. And we are fishermen, but we understand nature, we understand the sea, and this is how you should look after it." I think those people deserve a prize. I haven't managed to arrange them to get one because of the criteria is always the problem, but I think they deserve it. And the same is true, I have to say, of the inshore fishermen I've worked with. They understand stinting, they understand not taking too much. The industrial fleets don't get that at all. The inshore fleet is in a disgraceful state. It's on its knees, it's almost bankrupt. Nobody's given it any quota for the last 25 years, any opportunities to fish, other than non-quota species, so they're scratching away at the odd species they have here and there. And they're all going bust, and they're all over 75, and some of the ones who aren't over 75 are saying to me, it just isn't going to work, it's just not economic. And yet these are the people who, that keep coastal communities like this one alive. They're the ones who bring you some fish you can buy in the market or on the harbour. They are the ones we should be investing in for the future, because we've got it all wrong. It's the wrong way round. We don't even have a fishing strategy in this country. If we had a fishing strategy, we'd know whether we were doing it right or not. But at the moment, we give to the squeakiest wheel gets the oil. And shockingly, the squeakiest wheel in England is usually Dutch, because the Dutch have bought really large chunks of our English fishing industry. I think they own more than 50% of the quota in England. And so they not only they negotiate in Brussels, but they also negotiate through our organisations here to screw the inshore fishermen. And it won't do, and it's got to be reformed, and we need quota reform. And they bottled it with this post-Brexit Fishing Act. And now it looks as though they've bottled the sustainable management of the sea in the Fishing Act. And the Act is going to have to change, I'm afraid. Labour got this right in opposition in 2020. They said this won't work. But now they're in power, they've got many other better things to do. Well, I'm sorry, this is no good. You're going to have to fix it. Look at this, mackerel, cod, Celtic sea cod, haddock, whiting, herring, Irish sea cod, North Sea, horse mackerel, all zero tax from ICES.
Charles, are any of those on the menu tonight? We should.
He says no, please.
Charles, we could go on because I've got a string of more questions, but I think we should bring in the audience at this stage just to sort of allow them. And I know there are interested people. Ali is here from the oyster group that are just off Norfolk, and it would be nice to hear from them. But if we could throw it open to other people, but that was absolutely fantastic. I'm going to make you head of fisheries when we take over, because landscape and literature is not enough. We're going to take over the country. That's the next move. You could be the fisheries minister.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Yes, over here.
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering if the King is supportive and what the Crown Estates do to help you in England off the coast, if at all.
Is that a loaded question? Are you in some way connected to the Crown Estate? Right. You are absolutely on it, because we are still looking at this one. Because since we came out of Europe, the whole asset, the sea and the right to fish in it, is owned by the Crown. But we went back to the Crown Estate and said, does that mean you? They said, oh no, it's not us. No, it's far too complicated. We don't do that. They said, well, we think it is you. And we went to the King's people and said, well, it's not them. Is it you? And they said, well, us. 6 private secretaries and a couple of drivers and some staff. What are we supposed to do with it? And so, excuse me, it's a really good question, because it is a public ownership thing. King owns it on behalf of the people. But whereabouts is that ownership vested? I don't know.
Did you ask that question because you know something about this issue?
No, I just know the Crown Estates owns a load of seabed.
Yeah.
But we think they own the right to fish too, but nobody's managing it. Nobody is actually, it's very dodgy what is going on, because we're giving rights to fish, which belong to the Crown, which we're not extracting any value back from. We are not extracting a rent for it. We're assuming these guys pay their taxes. That's the only rent. But actually, if you did that in respect of a wind farm on the seabed or oil and gas reserves, people would be saying, well, what are we getting back for it? And if we were actually having to pay that much, maybe they'd do slightly less of it and do it better.
There's a lady behind.
So we're working through that with our lawyers, because we think the public trust aspects of this are the killer point. But we just did a sort of process court case before.
Oh, hi there. I am from Norfolk Seaweed and the Norfolk Oyster Company, so we have a licence to farm seaweed off the coast, and we also have a licence now to put in 4 million oysters off the coast up here. To pick up on that point, we find the Crown Estate of being incredibly fantastic. They're really engaged in trying to work on conservation, they're trying to help us. The people who are not helpful are the Marine Management Organisation and Natural England. Natural England seem to be intent on saying, no, we don't want to do nature recovery, we want to be difficult about it. I hope there's probably someone from here from Natural England. I really wish they had a policy about saying, yes, we think this is a good thing. I'd also like to suck up slightly and say I showed the end of the line in Morstan Church in 2012, and lots of people came and loved it, and it's amazing. So I would say trying to do marine conservation is really hard, because there's lots of organisations. It took us 5 years to get the seaweed licence. it's taken a year and a half for them to say, please can we have a licence to put down native oysters. We've been working for a year and a half on a project to try and put native oysters back in Blakeney Harbour, seagrass, and in every step of the way, people try to stop you. And what I want to see is people saying, let's try and do this, not let's just say computer says no. So I just wonder what your thoughts were about the sort of legislative environment around it. But to say, Crown Estate actually have been fantastic. Because they've changed their divisions. They now have a division which is expressly on marine net gain. It's not about the commercial side as well, so it's good.
Are they charging you rent?
Yeah, but very little. Actually, they're very, not a lot.
Well, it mirrors exactly our experience. I actually put Natural England on the back foot finally, who had obstructed us on the Blackwater. And funny enough, it was a lot to do with who owned it. They said, well, you can't prove who owns this. We said, it's a Crown Estate. They said, well, you can't prove that, so you need to ask the landowner. And we said, well, we thought you were the regulator. No, we're your critical friend, they said. And I said, well, just bugger off then. We know the landowner's a Crown Estate, so get out of my office. And this kept on being difficult. So the thing that actually worked is when I stood up at a conference and said, why has it taken Natural England 3 years, the same amount of time as it has taken me to get a marine reserve, the largest in the world, around Ascension, one of the largest in the world, around Ascension, to give us permission to put down 2 tons of oysters in the Blackwater estuary. Why? And in front of a conference, and the guy starts stammering and, it comes, rushing back to see me afterwards and say, oh no, we did have a meeting and all that sort of stuff. It's the only way to make them go away is absolutely put fear of crap up them. They are hopeless.
Is John Ebbage in the audience?
I know.
Thank God for that, because we'd have burnt him at
Oh,
the
they
stake.
don't believe in rewilding. This is the thing. They don't believe it on land, and they don't believe it in the sea. It's an ideological construct from the early 20th century that you couldn't possibly rewild anything, because nature doesn't do that.
No.
Well, it bloody well does in the sea. Hop it. Get out of here.
I do have a follow-up. How's the Hamble doing with the native oysters?
Well, we put some oysters onto
I watched the
culch
film
and so
last
on.
night, so.
It's, bless you, yeah. Well, hope yours work, hope ours work. But my worry is that we're going to have to put a lot more in than we thought we would.
You're doing 30,000, we're doing 4 million, so let's see how they go.
Does
Well,
anybody else
I
dare?
think we actually, well, I think it depends what stage you're talking about, doesn't it? So I think ours was supposed to be 1 billion, but in bits.
We'll continue the oyster face-off after.
Does anybody else dare ask a
But it depends
question?
on our side.
I'm just
This
saying,
side.
on behalf of Natural England, you can harangue John Ebbage tomorrow because he's doing a walk around the
Right.
estate rewilding project.
Yeah.
John is
Probably a
one
very
of
nice
the,
man.
We'll have,
definitely
you'll
one of
have
the
the
good guys.
Harry Hill fight,
Yeah, yeah. Jake, I think you had.
Great stuff, Charles. Sea level temperature rise. We've seen record-breaking temperatures this year across the globe, and we've seen increase in bluefin tuna in Cornwall, and we've seen more sharks, and we're seeing what are those things with tentacles?
Squid.
No, octopus is a huge explosion of
We're seeing
octopus.
octopus. Sorry, I'm very terrestrial.
Yeah.
So there are, and we're seeing cod and some of these cold water species move further north and less of them. Are there any? Do you see any pros and cons in sea level rise? I think. Are there any benefits that we might see, or is everything negative?
Well, we just had this wonderful talk from Julia before about who wrote this book called Time Song, which gives the and I recommend if you haven't read it, have a go at it, because it is a mind-blowing book about which gives sort of a fourth dimension to ecological problems. It's about the people who lived on Doggerland and what's happened to it since. So we've been from a time 7,000 years ago when people were making axes and killing mammoths and rhinoceroses, and living on the shores and hauling up seals, to a point where 150 years ago, the Dogger Hills, as they then were the most fertile parts of the North Sea, could be again. And so when you've got that extraordinary sense of time and obviously glacial melt going on, nothing is positive and nothing is negative, it just happens. It's really whether you create space for species to move and manage them better is really the only challenge, I think. Who are we to say what is going to happen or whether it's right? It will happen. The pent-up heat that we've already put into the oceans will probably make the sea levels 10 feet above Wales by sea sometime in the next few hundred years. But we won't be here. We won't be here. So I warn you, it's going to get worse, and it has always been like that. But I think you should have just got to put this fourth dimension to it and think how extraordinary and dynamic the sea has been already, and how and what good came of it is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, because you talk about corals, you know, about them being able to survive. Yeah. We're terrified of losing our corals because of these warm events with El Nino.
There's a very good point about that, because I think the only thing it's bad for is the human race. It might be great for nature, but the one of the sort of great gloomster favourite subjects is the bleaching of coral reefs, and until a day or two ago, I thought that was the same too. But I was talking to Callum Roberts, who many of you will know, who is a world-class marine conservation professor, and he's got a coral institute, and he's been in the Maldives. And I was asking about this coral bleaching, what is the percentage that they come back? And he says that the worst time was 1998, when the corals really couldn't cope with this. They'd never seen this before, and they all bleached, and it was terrible. But now there are little polyps on the end of the white dead branches, recolonizing. They are evolving so fast. Mm-hmm. The corals. Mm-hmm. They are not doing nothing about it. No. It's Jake's question again. You know, what happens? Is it bad or is it good? I don't know. It's just bloody happening, and you've got corals coming back where they were bleached white 20 years ago. That's evolution on speed, and it's rather marvellous.
Maybe it's on that note that we should end it. But Charles, huge thanks for giving us an exposition of something that most of us struggle to see. We've actually had 2 interlocking talks with Julia, talking about Doggerland and its kind of philosophical, but you taking us through the marine and you know, this terrible thing of thinking of it as resources. These are vital, vibrant, incredibly diverse life forces that shape the planet, and you've given us an insight into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.